If you're going to get culture right, it's a lot of work. It takes the constant day in, day out thinking about what am I trying to build? What's the vision? And then how do I not only bring the right people into the organization, how do I continue to pour into them so that everything that we're doing points to the mission, the vision, the core values. You're going to get less turnover, higher quality and productivity out of your employees, and they're going to love what they do.
Welcome to the Jon Marc Podcast. Today we have an excellent guest. You guys know of her as the former founder and chair of Caseworks. She is currently the EVP of Culture at the Angeion Group. This is someone who I personally and happily call a friend. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. Susan Barfield.
Thank you so much, Jon and Mark, for having me. Of course, talking about culture is, I'm going to kind of nerd out and talk a lot about it because I get excited about it. So anyway, thank you so much for having me.
First question for you. So culture is a word that's thrown around pretty freely in the business world, in the leadership world. As the EVP of culture, how do you actually measure your culture as being effective or the things you're doing are being effective?
Yeah, that's a great question. We track and measure everything. Of course, the saying is that which gets measured improves. So we track all of the cultural initiatives that we roll out from, the newsletters, and we can get more into depth talking about some of those specific initiatives, but kind of at a high level, employee engagement surveys. We do those on a quarterly basis. We're looking at employee net promoter scores. We also send out polls after some of the initiatives and the events that we do. And we're looking for feedback to see if it's moving the needle. Of course, we want to pour into our people and pour into the culture, which is driving employee engagement. And we can look at that by both the results from the employee engagement survey, but also looking at our attrition rates.
When you guys are surveying these employees, what is a expected score to know things are going well? Because if I got a 10 out of 10 from an NPS score, I'd be suspect that everyone just defaulted to 10. What is an expected score of you're hey, things are going well and are as they should be?
So I would say from the employee net promoter score, everything that I've read and the research that we've done indicates that a score greater than 50 indicates that your organization, you've got loyal employees, and that's kind of our goal. So we want not only a score of 50, but we also want high participation rates. So if you got low participation rates, that's probably also a good indicator that you don't have engaged employees. So That's just one of the questions, kind of gives us a pulse on the sentiment of our employees. But if we look at the overall employee engagement survey questions that we roll out on a quarterly basis, it comes from the Gallup 12. So we're looking at those questions, and we're looking again at the engagement and the participation from the questions and the score. So it's hard to let me speak a little bit on. We're looking at not just the actual score, but the feedback that the employees are. Every question, employees are able to give free text and kind of give a why behind their score. And so I would say that we've learned a lot. We start looking for trends in those responses. And to be honest, some of the feedback we've received from our employees helps to dictate and drive some of the new initiatives and maybe benefits, things we're looking to roll out. So I think it's a combination of participation rate and also the results.
Susan, you talked about how you measured culture and potentially the effectiveness of that culture within the team, but how have you seen a positive culture benefit the actual output of a company? How does it actually roll down to clients and what their expectations are in terms of being met or exceeded?
It is, of my opinion, and that's kind of why my role at Angeion Group is to be solely focused on driving the vision for the culture and making sure that it's rolled out. It is my opinion that if you have a strong culture with engaged employees, low attrition rate, then that is going to impact both productivity and the quality of the outcome of the work that we're doing within the organization.
What is the number one culture killer?
I would say misalignment. And for us, if you think about kind of, we've known you guys for years. And so with Caseworks being acquired and then Angeion Group and we merging 3 companies into one organization, you've got 3 different cultures coming together, whether it's stated and whether you have stated core values, there is a culture at every organization. So I believe that the number one kind of killer is misalignment of the culture as you're trying to blend those organizations together. And I would say if you're not in a position where you're bringing organizations together, I think one of the killers would be not hiring based on right person, right seat. Most organizations simply look for employees to be competent to do the role, but they're missing something very important, which is the right cultural fit. So the right person is a cultural fit, and having them in the right seat means that they have the GWC, they get it, want it, have the capacity to do it. And so it's I have found over the last 10 years, if you have hired the right person and they fit culturally, it's easier to move them maybe to a different role. But you can, if you hire just simply for the right seat, but it's a misalignment in culture, inevitably you're going to be managing that person out of the organization.
I will say the biggest lesson I've learned as a people leader, especially from the recruiting side, has been this lesson from specifically recruiting and hiring. I do remember we have extremely low attrition rate on our team of people who leave and then people who we've let go still. I believe we've done a really good job with hiring, but we used to go out and say, what's the best person we can find with the best, shiniest resume that we could afford for this position? And then go and find them and then put them in the role. But now it's like, I want a 100% culture fit, someone who's hungry, who I believe has the ability to learn the skills we need for this position and can grow into the perfect JD. And like all those people that we've given those opportunities, almost all of them have exceeded expectations, drive a ton of value to the business, stay a long time, are very happy. And almost every person we get like recruited in with like the perfect resume, we like terminated or cycled out of the business very quickly because it was not a fit.
Exactly. I mean, I would say that as leaders, we should always be thinking about succession planning. How do we pour into our people, and are we hiring individuals that are not only competent for the role that we're hiring them for, but if they're a great cultural fit, then they're going to be looking for new opportunities. And plus, at our organization, like we want to instill the ownership mentality, not just, this is not just another job, this is an opportunity. And so within that, you've got to have career progression and leadership and development and such. So anyway, I couldn't agree with you more.
How do you screen for culture fit during the recruiting and interviewing and hiring process?
Culture starts even just with the interviewing process, and there's certain we have outlined questions that the team that the hiring managers are asking specific questions. I know when we were at Caseworks, we had a team solely dedicated to asking all the cultural questions, to making sure that this person was going to be a good cultural fit. And so we didn't give them hints, before they got to meet with them, like, oh, this person's, competent and they would do the role really well. We just allowed them to have their, hour, and they would kind of come on 3 or 4 of our employees that had been with us for a long time that really exuded our core values, kind of interview that person solely looking for the cultural fit.
Did you do that at the end of the interview process after they've already checked all the skill boxes, or do you do that on the front end or in the middle?
It was definitely done up front.
Up front. So you're screening for culture before you're screening for skill fit.
Yes. And now it could have been from a timing perspective. If that team, inevitably we had the team that was the hiring manager that was going to be leading this employee. They could have, interviewed them initially, but it happened in tandem so that we didn't get too far into the process finding out that it wasn't a good cultural fit.
I did the first round interviews for the first 50 hires of our team. For all of the candidates, which was a nightmare from a scheduling and perspective of first round interviews. But I was razor focused on making sure we had culture fits for these hires, that like when your team is growing from 0 people to Jon and I, our team's over 60 people at this point. If you have a bad culture fit when you have 3 people, it is horrible. At 10 people, at 50, every bad culture fit it is, but the smaller you are, the more exponential the impact is if you get a bad hire and a bad culture fit. So I was razor focused on making sure that every single person that we interviewed, I like this person, I want to work with this person, I think they will fit in the team and the company culture as a whole. And I think a lot of people don't invest enough time into doing that as leaders in the company, and they give that piece to the recruiter or someone else to offload the work to, and they just come in for the final interview. I know doing it up front seems like a lot of work, but I think it's really worth the investment for people to do. I don't do the first rounds anymore. I have great people leaders who I trust to vet all that out, But I do think, depending on your size, it is extremely important to be involved in that process.
I'm smiling and kind of laughing. I remember the days that I did all the interviews too. You get to a certain employee count where you no longer can do that. But turnover is costly. It's costly to the organization. When you bring people in that aren't good cultural fits, they're toxic. And when you're trying to build an organization, especially a small business like Caseworks was in the beginning, it takes too much time, energy, and money to have all the turnover. So it's worth the investment up front for sure.
Also, for those listening, some little inside stories for us. When we were growing our team, we got to the point about 10 people. Culture was something I really cared about and focused on. I actually gave Susan a call. I have my notes pulled up here, August 10th, 2022. And I was like, hey, Susan, you have a great culture. Like, can I pick your brain on best practices of how you built it, things you do, initiatives you have, and some lessons you've learned? And most of those things, we took them, we modified them, we made them our own. But I remember like hitting the ground running and implementing a ton of those things, which was like a huge impact on our business and our teams on how we operate. And I am forever grateful. So I just want to say thank you for that.
For sure. And I bet you probably, and I can talk a lot about culture, but I think one thing people don't appreciate is the amount of work it takes to get it right. I mean, if you're going to get culture right, it's a lot of work. It takes, the constant day in, day out thinking about what am I trying to build? What's the vision? And then how do I not only bring the right people into the organization, how do I continue to pour into them so that everything that we're doing points to the mission, the vision, the core values? Like I said, it all goes back to you're going to get less turnover, higher quality and productivity out of your employees, and they're going to love what they do. So
one of the things that we implemented after I spoke with you a couple of years ago is this tool called 15-5. Jon, can you kind of talk about like how we use it and like the value it brings us as leaders who aren't like, as a remote team who's like not talking to every employee every day?
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, Mark, you never told me that Susan was the one who gave you the idea to use 15.5. All along, I thought that was your idea, but kudos to you.
No, it was another tool. It was another tool that she suggested, but we ended up going with 15.5.
Got it. Yeah. I love that application. It is our internal people communication and celebration tool. And it serves a number of different purposes. So we track one-on-ones instead of them just being a one-on-one with an employee where it's on a video call or done in person. We actually create a template, and every week or every 2 weeks, depending on the cadence, the same template gets sent in advance for what we call a check-in. And it's just sort of a pulse checking on a scale of 1 to 5. How are things going for you? And then there's certain questions that each department has. They fill out those check-ins, and then when the one-on-ones happen, the check-in within the application serves as the basis for the one-on-one. So yes, there's opportunity for free-flowing conversation, but it is very much a structured, agenda-driven conversation. And all of those check-ins and one-on-ones are then in the system. So when we go back and you want to see like, hey, how has so-and-so progressed, or what were the challenges that they had last quarter or last year? It's all there. My favorite part is the aggregation of that information, specifically that 1 to 5. Mark and I track this like a hawk. So we see the overall vibe of the organization, and we can tell when there's a little dip and it dropped from a 4.8 to a 4.5. And then we have to dig in and see, is that department specific? Is it, does it have to do with people working on a certain client, or what's going on? But that has allowed us to take the qualitative, turn it quantitative, and make it actionable. A variety of other ways we use it, celebrating successes and things like that. We integrate it into a bunch of other tools that we have. But yeah, I mean, it has been a game changer for us in terms of making the culture more visible and the communication about things other than work product a meaningful and deliberate part of our organization.
One of the things that I learned from this tool that I found super insightful that I didn't expect is, so the check-ins happen, whatever cadence you decide to have a check-in with your managers, whatever. But the opportunity for people to talk about what they did well, to celebrate themselves, but also things that didn't go well that they're not happy about. People, depending on your generation and your personality, are more comfortable writing their complaints in a safe space and giving it to their manager beforehand than actually verbalizing them when they're upset about things. So we know a lot of times when people, like our team, will have a meeting with their boss, won't say anything's wrong, but when their check-in comes in, they'll write us exactly what's wrong, what happened in this scenario. And then their manager gets that, is able to read it beforehand and come prepared to have a very useful conversation to solve those issues moving forward. And it helps us alleviate a ton of issues. Or whenever these come up as well, like that manager will send it to the other manager, maybe another department caused an issue, or they'll send it directly to Jon and I to review. So we'll start coming up with a plan to come up with like a solution to this employee's problem to make them happy or to resolve this, so we have next steps or action plan in place when they go into that one-on-one, so the employees like issues don't fester and, grow out of control. It's something I didn't expect to be one of the most valuable pieces of it. I thought, for me, when I'm upset, me, Susan, I just say when I'm upset and when I'm like not happy about, but a lot of people aren't like that and prefer to write their thoughts down, really think it through and send it off to someone, feel more safe doing that. And that's been a huge game changer for us for resolving issues.
For sure. Yep. And I think a couple of things that you just mentioned that I wanted to touch on. There's a lot of organizations that don't do consistent one-on-ones. And even the organizations that are doing consistent one-on-ones, I would say that as business owners, we just kind of have an expectation that, our leaders are conducting effective one-on-ones. I was reading a book and doing a lot of research on what does that even mean? What does an effective one-on-one mean? And how do you have that? Well, one, it needs to be consistent. So everyone in the organization I like that you guys said you have a template. So everyone is kind of following a similar approach to how to make the best use of that time. And that employees are expected to come prepared for that one-on-one. They've had the opportunity to share feedback with their direct manager, that the manager is able to see that. The number one thing that I read and researched says that you're having an effective one-on-one is that the employees are receiving feedback. It doesn't have to be positive feedback, but just that they're receiving feedback like within the last couple of weeks. They feel more connected to the organization. So I think that's great. And a reward and recognition platform. I mean, that is something we've had in place for since the beginning. Again, going back to if you're an owner, I mean, we just don't have time. Like, there's so many great things that our team members are doing, but as your organization grows, it's hard to give the shout outs and give the recognition. And the behavior that gets recognized is going to be repeated, right? So we want to make sure we're recognizing the things that our employees are doing, especially when they go beyond, they're exuding our core values. And so it's so important, I believe, to have a reward and recognition platform.
Agreed. I would say that's like 15.5 has that functionality built in. It's tied into our Slack too. So whenever they're called giving out high fives. So whenever someone does something good, you give them a high five. And it is an ingrained part of our culture. If someone helps you out and you're grateful, you give a high five. And like we do it a little less than we used to. We were very aggressive with it when we started. Our management team has expectations of that they should be leading their team from the front and giving recognition to all their team members when they're doing great work. And it's a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy of like people give recognition to each other, people are willing to help out. And then we've used that as our benefit system, which we can get into of how we do that for culture.
Yeah. Marc, you talk about the concept that you came up with and how we use the high fives as a reward system.
Yeah. So Susan, you once again gave me this idea and we're like, how do we do something that's like not too gameable? Where it's like, we want people to give recognition, but we don't want to be like, hey, Susan, nice hair. And just like firing all these down to game the system. So every month we have an all hands. Once again, town hall meeting. I got that from Susan to make sure we're all like rowing the oars in the same direction. But we call it the wheel names. But for every high five that you give and receive, you get one token towards the drawing. And then we do a lot live drawings depending for $250. And how many tokens you have is how many times your name is in it. And then at the end of the all hands meeting, we pull up the wheel and we spin it live. And then that's like the bonus program for incentiveness. So people that helped out a lot as well as gave shout outs a lot have a good bit of tokens or increase their chances of winning. But it's fun.
I love that. Yeah, for sure. We have within our reward and recognition platform, when you give a shout out, you're going to tag one of the core values. And so after, merging the companies together, we've created new core values, but the core values that we, had within Caseworks, within that reward recognition platform, we would tag, you're giving a shout out, great job for whatever, love or bad attitude, whichever one that was applicable for that shout out. And then so at our town hall meetings on a quarterly basis, we would run a report to see who was tagged with the most. We have 5 core values, for love, who was tagged the most over the past quarter for that, or 5-star leadership. And then that person would get we call them like culture champions. So they would get, back in the day, we had trophies made. And I'm like driving to the post office and mailing the trophies, and it's Caseworks swag and sending it out to them. And they loved it. It's so fun to, hop onto a call, a video call today, and see someone's trophy sitting like on their desk. So we don't do that. We still do Culture Champion Awards, but it's not, the trophies anymore, but it's other things. But all fun things for sure. People love to be recognized, and we don't do it enough. And, I know that just kind of being culture and employee engagement being on the forefront of my mind since the early days. I mean, we have been able to track the productivity and such based on, recognition. So I think what you're doing is great.
So your core values is something I want to talk about next, or the old core values. You have the new ones. How do you go about defining those, and do you have any recommendations for people? Because some people probably say they do, but I remember when we had our conversation, I was like, "Oh, we got to create core values," and John and I just stood there and looked at each other. We were like, "Oh man, this seems daunting to come up with core values of the organization." So, what recommendations do you have like going about that process?
Yeah, great question. I'm thinking back to when we came up with our core values. One, it starts with your mission statement. Like, what is the purpose of the organization? And so I had read some books by Truett Cathy early
Mm-hmm.
on, and the founder of Chick-fil-A, and he just talked about you've got to have a mission, and you got to have core values, and he kind of planted the seed for me, at least reading these books, the importance of the core values and firing by your core values. And so that kind of started with, okay, what's the mission statement? So for Caseworks, it was helping loggers help people. And so we defined, okay, here's the mission statement. Now, what are the behaviors we expect our employees to exude that on a daily basis, whether it's in their actions or in their decision-making process, that is going to help propel us to helping loggers help people. And so that's how we came up with our core values and their collaboration. And when I talk about our core values and I talk like things like collaboration, it's not just an internal collaboration, but it's collaborating with our law firms and our attorneys, and how do we effectively become ingrained into their team. And it's also collaborating with the plaintiffs. And so we had collaboration, we had badassitude. Of course,
Can
that
you
just
please
means
explain what that is to the audience?
yeah, that's not to be mistaken for bad attitude. Those folks would not make it in. It was bad attitude. Just basically, you had to be a badass. I mean, you had to be not only competent, but show up to work kind of with this internal drive to do well. Just an ultimate badass. 5-star leadership. We expect everyone to act like leaders, and we defined what that meant at Caseworks, and making decisions, how we talk with one another, and how do we execute on what we're supposed to be doing on a daily basis. Love, and that oftentimes I would share with people, that doesn't mean like, oh, I love Caseworks and I love you and we just love everything. I mean, sometimes that's tough love. I mean, you got to have a lot of tough love conversations with employees for sure, but as long as we're doing it with respect, then we feel like that we're exuding the core values. And then own it. And this was something that was really important to me. Oftentimes, working with different partners and different groups, they always want to punt the ball back over to, let's say, for Caseworks or whoever it is. And we would always explain that we own the problem, and so we need to see it through. So those were our core values.
It's interesting. Those core values could just basically be the description of Susan Barfield.
Yes.
Like you were leading and exuding them from the front. What do you do if someone doesn't fit that mold or doesn't fit part of that mold? I mean, we know what happens if they don't fit any of the mold, but out of those, let's say they fit 3. What do you do with someone? Do you coach them up to exude all of them, or is it like an all or nothing thing?
Yeah, goes back to the one-on-ones. So during the one-on-ones, we're talking with employees about how do they measure against the core values. And so if they've had some instances where maybe they didn't exude love, or they passed the buck and they, should have taken care of a task themselves versus, get someone else involved. And then their leader needs to be talking to them about that and, just giving them examples and what the expectations are, and then a timeline by which, we would expect to see improvements. I mean, the one-on-ones should be leading up, whether you're doing them on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly basis. We would share with our leaders that at the time of, I don't like to call it like annual performance because everyone gets nervous about that. But at the point in the year where we're having conversations around merit increases or whatever the case may be, it should never be a surprise. You've had all these conversations leading up to that point, and there should just be no surprise about someone's performance.
It's one of the things I want to call it too is something I align with as well is when I'm listening to you speak is you don't call anyone a manager. They're leaders. Like I've learned this from you and from other leaders as well. Like we don't have any managers in our company. We have people leaders. So like just because someone should get promoted or get a raise, like if they are not going to be the best people leader for that organization, they should not be in that role. And like that's the biggest difference I've seen of like companies with good culture versus bad culture is like bad cultures usually have a lot of managers where they're in the role managing people just to make sure the work gets done. Whereas like good cultures have people leaders that are leading their team from the front and everyone's aligned with that leader going in the same direction.
Yeah. You have a lot of cultural ambassadors for sure.
I have also seen, I want your opinion on something related to this. I have seen companies come up with, core values before, and then they talk about them. And then I meet the leaders at that company that do not have the same core values.
The alignment is missing.
How do you, people say they have core values, but like, how do you actually make sure they happen? Once again, John's comment is pretty spot on. When you're defining your core values, you just kind of like defined yourself and you're like, hey, this is what the company's gonna be like. So it's a great strategy, but how do you make sure that the core values of the company are actually the core values of the company? Because for example, you came up with them doesn't mean that everyone in the company might be following along with that or sees it as the same as you. There can be a misalignment of vision.
Mm-hmm. For sure, once you define the core values, it needs to be ingrained in everything that you do within the organization. Meaning, okay, we've got a core values, we hashtag and attach that to the shout outs that we're giving, all the initiatives. Let's say, as I mentioned, one of ours was collaboration. So we have monthly collaboration classes, the town hall meetings, we on a quarterly basis, we always highlight one of the core values. You guys know this, we came up, so we've got our logo, which is great, like for the company, but we also came up with like what I call a patch value, like an emblem that signifies, and it's an imagery representing the core values. And I came up with this because when we, way back in the day, when we came up with the core values for Caseworks, one day I just happened to, I don't know why I even thought to do this. I asked one of our medical reviewers, I said, hey, name the 5 core values. And she kind of stumbled through them. And she was like our longest tenured employee. And I'm like, you don't know our core values? And she got to 1 or 2 and she's like, shoot, I don't know them. And I said, okay, well, we got to do better than this. Although you exude the core values, you got to be able to like name them and rattle them off because you got to live them. They got to be part of who you are and the decisions that you're making. So we created this patch value and it helps to kind of in your mind kind of think about it. And so of course people got stickers and, we go to great lengths that like I said, we kind of talk about our core values often and throughout the initiatives. And it's also in our internal messaging. And when I say internal messaging, we do a monthly newsletter and we're highlighting people and it's, we're celebrating one another and we highlight a core value there too. So it's kind of ingrained in everything that we do. What we didn't want to be is a company that said we had core values and they're kind of like a plaque on the wall. But like you said, leadership doesn't lead by example. So I mean, I think it's, I guess as an employee, that would probably be, if I was going to look for a role somewhere, that would be one of the first things I'm asking about is tell me about your culture, tell me about your core values. I mean, the core values really help to understand and define what the culture is. And if your leaders can explain what the culture and core values are, then, that's a great thing.
That reminds me of when I'm doing all the screening for new hires, the first thing I would do is explain our core values of what we care about most about the company. And like to make sure they're aligned. And for example, I'd be like, hey, part of the core company culture here is we all work very hard. And I've had people like after a good first interview be like, hey, I don't think this is a fit for me. I'm not really looking for that at this point in my career.
Sure. Yep.
Thanks for telling us up front. Much appreciated.
Yeah.
So these are all great things. And like, I think people would want to implement them. I think it's becoming harder and harder to do in today's disjointed office environment with everyone remote. So like, what tips do you guys have to roll this out to employees as a more and more remote workforce and more diverse workforce with huge different age groups coming into the workplace at any time due to people being remote all over the country and just personalities wise?
Let me make sure I understand the question. So you're asking, like, how do we roll out initiatives or activities and events in a fully remote company?
Yes, that's a great way to ask my question. Hey, Susan, how do you roll this out at a fully remote company?
Yeah. You know, Caseworks has always been a fully remote company. And now that we're part of a larger organization, Angeion Group, there's a hybrid. I mean, there's a Philadelphia-based office where people go into the office. And so that's the part that you're missing, right? When you're a remote company, you don't get to kind of chit-chat and walk by someone's cubicle or get to find out how their weekend went, what's going on with their kids. And so I would say, early on, someone connected me to a gentleman by the name of Max Spiegel, and he founded a company called Student Loan Hero, and had just recently, he's a young guy, had recently been acquired, and someone thought, Susan, you're all about culture and you're a remote company, you should visit with him. And one of the things he said was, you've got to be very intentional and you can't really overinvest in your people and culture. And you've got to have someone that's really dedicated on a daily basis to be talking to your employees, knowing what they want, how do you support them. And so I took that and started coming up with looking at the feedback we were receiving on employee engagement surveys. We held like 8 different focus groups. So we invited, I don't remember the number of employees we had at the time, but it was, let's say, 80 people. So we had 8 different sessions for 1 hour where 10 employees, we didn't want any more than 10 in one group, came on, and we had asked them some questions before. It's like, how, if you were to look at our culture today and the way we're supporting you, is there anything we could be doing better? Have you heard of other initiatives at other companies that you think are cool that would, be really supportive? And so we spent an hour with each group of employees and got really great candid feedback. There's nothing better, and to show your people that their voice really matters, they tell you and they share feedback, and then you go implement it. And so people got really excited because they would see, we not only did the employee engagement surveys, we looked at the feedback, we then would show that at the town hall meeting, like here are the results. We were transparent. People love transparency. And then based on your feedback, here are some things that are going to be changing, and here's some new initiatives. And so that it got people excited. Like, this is a forum and a platform. I can anonymously give the feedback. Executive team is listening, and they're making the changes. And so we came up with, here are the initiatives that we feel is going to be best to support our team. And then we just started rolling those out. And it's not like I've shared, I've had people come to me and say, hey, how have you been able to accomplish such great employee engagement at Caseworks? And when I tell them all the things we do, they're like, oh my gosh, like, okay, just help me get started with the newsletter. Like that's a task in and of itself, or just help me get a town hall agenda. And what do you do? And so I think it's like, just start out slowly, come up with a few initiatives, start rolling them out, and then start testing and getting feedback, having your leaders reach out to their team and get a pulse of like, hey, did you like that? Did you not? If we're going to do another town hall meeting, what else would you like to talk about? And I think that is where you see a lot of excitement and momentum.
Yeah, I would say for people that are overwhelmed about getting started, there's 2 easy ways to do it. Call someone that you know at a company that has great culture and ask what they do. Like that's what I did with Susan. I was like, why might try to, recreate the wheel here? And then 2, just ask your employees. You have some great people that work for you. Ask them for recommendations, feedback, and some of the best ideas we get are just from our team. We do a survey every year. It has 2 questions on it. What are we doing that's great that we should keep doing? Those answers are usually pretty fluffy. Like, I get 0 value out of that. But the second question is, it gets wild. I say, what is something dumb that we're doing today that we should stop doing? And then people are like ready to go. They've like been warmed up. I give like their positive feedback, and they feel comfortable in a safe space, just like ripping us apart on dumb stuff we're doing. And we get some good stuff every year. We're like, why are we doing this? This makes no sense. And then we take all those ideas, and then we go to that person who had that feedback. Sometimes it's a trend, get their input on like how we should fix it. And usually their input is how we solve the problem, and it goes pretty quickly, and they're pretty fulfilled in that. But kind of asking our employees what we're doing wrong is usually a great way for them to tell us what we should be doing.
For sure. I mean, I would say those are the two best ways. Employees are not going to hold back on telling you what you're not doing well. And if you think about it from and I want to have an opportunity to talk to you about what I've been able to do at Angeion Group. I created like a culture club, and we've got like 15% of the organization that's part of the culture club. But before I dive into that, yes, call people that have great culture in an organization and listen to them and implement their ideas. Like, of course, I'm always willing to share. I got a lot of great ideas from Zappos. I don't know if you guys have, I am like a huge believer in Tony Hsieh and what he was able to accomplish at Zappos. And I wouldn't say I stole some of their ideas, but I did talk to their head of culture that was there for many, many, many years. And she said, here are the things that really propelled us quickly and moved the needle with employee engagement. And hey, we're doing them, and they are working. And so that's great. And yeah, I think the employees are going to give you a lot of feedback. And as a business owner, if I'm setting aside X amount of dollars into a pot of money that I'm going to go deploy and hope that it's going to move the needle on employee engagement, then I want to make sure I hit the bullseye with that. And there's no better person than your people to tell you, is that going to move the needle or not?
Also, a recommendation, I would say, Jon and I wouldn't say for defining core values, but if you know us, this is very much on brand for us. We sat down and we just did all the things we hate about all the culture at our past jobs and companies and made a list. And then we're like, all right, let's just do the opposite of that. And then that was like our core aligning values of what we work towards. Try to make it very simple. We try to come up, like, fluffy stuff is not our forte, but we're like, let's just write out all the things we hate about past jobs. And the list got pretty long pretty quick. I'm like, all right, here's the things we really care about. Well, let's just figure out to do the opposite.
Be direct, be transparent, but don't be an asshole.
Yeah.
Top of the list.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Then you're doing better than most organizations.
I 100% agree with you on the transparency part. Mark and I practice radical transparency, sometimes to a fault. We feel like it's really important for people to know about what's going on and why we're doing the things that we're doing, even if you don't have 100% of the information yet. As long as it's something that's not privileged, being able to share with the team that, like, this is something that we're like 90% of the way there towards implementing, or this is something that we believe is coming down the pipe and this is how long, just so they're not smacked in the face and blindsided by some large initiative or a big client or a big shift in strategy. We have those conversations a lot, and they're not the most comfortable conversations to have, because as a leader, you're sort of trained by default to have all the answers. And by us communicating things where we just by default don't have those answers, it opens up the conversation, and maybe the employees help us get all the way to that point where we have kind of the full solution in place. But at the very least, it's something that they know is coming, and it doesn't just come and hit them out of left field. And that's so important to make sure that your staff doesn't feel like they're not a part of the formula, because they are.
That's right. Yeah, they've got to have buy-in. They've got to trust you. And I would say that's probably, if I think back over the last 10 years, that would probably be one of my biggest, I wouldn't say mistakes, but I wish I would have done that early on. So you said, kind of as a business owner, you're trained. I think as a parent too, you're kind of trained to shield your kids from like stress and problems. And so that bleeds over. If you care about your employees, you don't want them to have to shoulder or be concerned. I mean, as a business owner, there's a lot of sleepless nights. I mean, there are problems and there are issues with running a business, growing a business. Heck, just think back to COVID. I mean, it was rough. And it was shortly after that, I was reading a book, and we were doing some leadership and development courses, and they talked about just how powerful transparency can be. Just like you said, Jon, you don't have to tell them, you might not know everything, but if you just give them a little bit of behind the scenes of what's happening and the why behind some of the decisions, man, they're going to be bought in, they're going to be on board. Those leaders are going to take that information. And if your leaders absorb the information and they understand, then they can go disseminate, and they are great ambassadors for the decisions that you're making as an organization. Even if they're like decisions that, let's say, like during COVID, I mean, we had to downsize, we had to do some furloughs. And I mean, we're letting go or furloughing people that are like, feel like family to us, but those are just hard decisions. But if you kind of open up, and like you said, as long as it's not confidential and there is a point of which being too open, your team is going to trust you, and they're going to stand right by you through all those decisions. So I wish I would have done that earlier on.
Yeah. How do you go about communicating when employees have to leave an organization because of culture fit? Someone who looks like a great performer, but yet you have to part ways with them because they don't fit. How do you communicate that to the rest of the team?
In the past, the team would be communicating that to me prior to me having to communicate that out. Like they're like, hey, this person, while they are meeting objectives and they're executing with excellence, here are ongoing examples. And of course, it's not like one decision and one thing, you're managing someone out of the organization. I mean, there's lots of conversations and lots of discussions around, again, giving examples to employees of like, here is an example of not exceeding the core value, and here's kind of the expectation. And then a time period by which we're expecting to see some turnaround. And so it's really, again, going back to what I said earlier about one-on-ones, it just really shouldn't be a surprise to the employee either. You have enough chances and enough discussions, you understand that it's probably not going to turn around. And by that time, the organization, other people have already seen it, and you owe it to your team, right? That person's toxic, and it becomes a distraction, and they are a detractor, and you've got objectives that you're trying to meet and timelines, and, we just don't have time. There's too many talented people out there.
Yep. On the side of transparency, we have decided that whenever someone is terminated, with being respectful to the person that's leaving, but give like a clear explanation of this is why we made the decision, this is why they're leaving, and they're gone. We either say it on the all hands when people go, or just directly to the company, so people are crystal clear on what happened on that situation. We try not to talk negatively about anyone who's leaving, but we explain very clearly why it was no longer a fit of the company and why we've asked them to move on.
For sure.
I think people appreciate that.
Yeah, and I would say too, like you guys know, like I care deeply for our employees and about them and just everything that's their kids and all the things. And so when someone leaves, it's rare that it's contentious. It's usually, you come to a mutual agreement, and I've even said, like, what is it that you want to do? Or are there any other roles? Written letters of recommendation, like help them get to a new role. Because at the end of the day, that's the way we should be treating our employees. They devoted the time. It was a unfortunate hire, and we probably didn't do our diligence. And, had we done maybe a little bit better upfront interviewing process, maybe we would have spotted this. But never the case, help them get to their next landing spot.
That has been my explanation on many of the people who have been terminated is I made a bad hire. That one's on me.
Yep. That's right. Exactly.
So you mentioned the things you're doing at Angeion Group. Can you talk about those?
Yeah, happy to. As I, thought about how I could add the most value as we were, combining these organizations, I said, there's probably no one that's going to love our people more than me. And I love culture and employee engagement, and would love to be able to set the vision and help to align the organizations as we were coming together. Because I was reading some stats actually last week, putting a presentation together. So today, the U.S. sits at about a national attrition rate of 17%. And thinking about kind of the culture initiatives and like, okay, we're measuring it. What should we have expected? So that's kind of the national attrition rate. But then when you add merger and acquisition, in a lot of companies can anticipate upwards of 30% attrition rate during the first year of a merger and acquisition. That's a lot. And so my goal was to come in and set a strategy that's supporting the vision, the business objectives, and roll out different initiatives. And so I've been doing that. But we had employees for different organizations, were remote. So how do we get these employees to collaborate and feel as part of a larger organization and such? And so I decided that this is a large body of work, starting kind of back over and trying to roll out initiatives. And I thought no better way to get buy-in from our employees than to open up like what I call the Angeion Group Culture Club. And so I was excited and surprised to get, nearly 15% of people raising their hands saying that they wanted to be part of the club. And I was like, whoop, that's a lot of people. So how are we going to do this? And so I kind of divided the group into mini culture clubs, and those mini culture clubs are focused on one initiative. And I'll tell you, we've got a lot of smart, talented, creative people, far better ideas than what I was coming up with. So this is exciting because, of course, I've still overseen each club, but they are getting to feel like they're owning that piece of the culture. And so if you think about 15% of an organization, they go out and they positively impact another 1 or 2 employees. You get a lot of movement pretty quickly. And like I said, some really great ideas that are coming our way. And so we're just seeing a lot of excitement, and they feel like each one of the mini clubs has a lead and a co-lead. Every great idea can't be implemented, of course, but I'm also teaching them the concept that we're coming up with ideas and we're going to invest resources into executing on these ideas. We've got to track everything that we do, and we've got to have a return on investment. And so I've started tracking like every event that we do, even sending out newsletters. And so we are seeing just a great movement in a positive direction with employee engagement, but also our attrition rate is like low single digit. Like, it's pretty impressive that we went through a merger and acquisition and our attrition rate got better. It was already way lower than the national attrition rate, but now we're like low single digit. And so I think it's a testament to not only the things that we're doing, the excitement around the culture club, and we've got that large body of the organization excited about employee engagement, and they're helping to drive the participation because they're putting in all this time and work, and they're like, this is a lot of work. I didn't think like putting on a collaboration class was this hard. So they're getting people to show up, and then of course when people show up and they participate, they see the value of what we're trying to do. So we're still doing a lot of the things that we've done in the past, but of course with a different flair. Of course, we're still doing the quarterly town hall meetings, and we're doing virtual events. Like in November, we're having a South African safari tour. A lady in South Africa is going to do a tour. It's really cool. And of course, holiday party. We're doing, think about
Is
like
the
America's
holiday
Got
party remote?
It's going to be remote. And you think about America's Got Talent. This is Angeion's Got Talent. And so we're going to do talent and awards. And then we'll have other virtual, after the talent show, people can get into virtual rooms. I think the monthly collaboration classes, when you have these organizations come together, you've got mass torts, you've got class action, you have bankruptcy. So mass tort, I've been doing that for 10 years. Like, what does it mean for claims administration? And so we're having people from different organizations give a presentation on like, what does their business unit do and the services that we're providing. And so I think that's great. Leadership and development courses, and of course merging reward and recognition platforms. So we got a lot of things happening that just take a lot of people. So
I'm about to steal that, John. I'm going to have our team give a presentation of what they do in the day-to-day to another team they work with.
There you go. I think like here we are 3 years later, right? We've got another list of ideas that Susan has now tested and implemented over the last 3 years that we can talk about.
I personally am going to argue with you on something. I am not a big believer in virtual events for employees because I believe it's extremely difficult for people to have natural conversation in large groups virtually, which is my big rub with it. But it's better than nothing. So that's my biggest qualm with that is I've been forced to go to those, but in the past, so I have like a knee-jerk reaction that I don't like them, where I'm like stuck listening to like 2 people control the conversation because remotely you can't like have like, it's not like at a bar where you can have like 6 people yelling at each other, but all different conversations. Once you're in a those ones, I struggle with that. We believe as a remote team, we believe that it's important for everyone to get together at least once a year to meet. It's like a huge investment and it's like a ton of money, but like just having everyone meet people that they work with in person helps resolve a ton of personal issues moving forward that anyone might have, and like have them actually talk about what they do and figure stuff out and build relationships that last a long time just from being able to meet someone in person, which it doesn't happen as much anymore. We have a ton of staff who, when they started, had never met anyone they'd ever worked with their entire career.
For sure. Yeah, no,
or ever been to an office.
100%. I mean, there's nothing like getting eyeball to eyeball or breaking bread with someone that, maybe you weren't. It's easy to kind of have personality conflicts over, Teams or whatever
Slack,
the case may be.
read someone's Slack the wrong way. And
that's right, for sure. I mean, what you can do at a smaller company, like, when we were 50, 60, 70 people is different than what we can do at over 300 people. It's just tough. And, employees spread across all 50 states. So that's That's the only challenging, but we're going to make it work.
But Mark and I travel a ton, right? We're all
Mhm.
over the country all the time, whether it's for conferences or to meet with some of our clients. We make a deliberate effort that when we go into markets where we have employees who are within an hour or two driving distance, we'll just come a day early and like do a dinner. And like anyone who's in
sure.
the area, 5, 10, 15 people, maybe it's one person, but we try as much as possible to have that FaceTime when we're already in a place and someone else already lives there.
For sure. The other virtual event we're doing that I'm excited about, I don't know how I came up with this idea, but
I like
we're
the
going to
safari
do.
thing, actually.
Yeah, it's so
It's-
cool. And I'll send you the information so you can look it up. The lady's amazing. And yeah, I know the event will be a lot of fun. And it's something different.
Yeah.
We've done over the last 10 years, we've done all the virtual events. And so this was something fun. Something else I think is important as leaders and for your organization to see is that we're doing some type of philanthropic work. And so we're going to do an auction in May, like with a live, like it's going to be a virtual auction, but with a live auctioneer, that's like $5, $5.50. I
Yeah.
can't do how they.
I get it. You're doing good.
Yeah. And people, but we're going to raise money and lots of cool items, and people are going to donate. And I've already been talking to people. And so all the money that we're going to raise, the employees are going to kind of determine, 3 organizations that they would like for us to donate to. And we'll split it and donate to those organizations. So I think it'll be fun coming together. It'll be a fun event. And yeah, being able to give money back to organizations that are, mean something to our employees.
I like that.
Yeah.
It's awesome. The value that you can add to law firms specifically, which are the majority of the people who are watching this, though I do think that your concepts are very far reaching and you've adopted some things from other industries. Incredible value. I hope that those of you watching today were able to take at least one thing away, but I'm pretty sure you probably got pages of notes and potential items that you could implement at your law firm or within your organization. Susan, could not be more thankful for you taking the time out of your day to join us. Always love speaking with you. Hope the family is doing really well. And we look forward to seeing you again soon in person.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I'm excited. I'm grateful that you guys thought of me to come on and talk about something I'm obviously very passionate about. So thank you both.
Thank you, Susan.